Your source for everything paranormal. Parax. Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Channeling History. We're the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen, and all of our guests have passed. So we don't have to worry about getting a list of people to come forward because we got a lot to choose from. And we're brought to you tonight by the Parax Radio Network. We want you to know that the opinions or statements that are voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the Parax Network, or our sponsors. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I'll be doing the channeling tonight.
And I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host. I would like to thank all of you for tuning in to our show again this evening. I will be asking the questions of our spirit guest tonight. We will be channeling one of the great prophets and organizers of huge spiritual movement, Buddha. He was a great philosopher, teacher, and religious leader that lived in India during the 5th century. He taught a spiritual path that has endured and grown in our modern world. We've channeled with him before, and he is a wonderful energy.
Well, most of our shows will be dedicated to interviewing historic and famous figures. We are planning some special shows in the future in which we hope to solve mysteries and even unsolved crimes. One show that we're planning to do is about the Battle of the Little Bighorn, in which General Custer and the 7th Cavalry was essentially wiped out. Our plan on that show is we want to interview both Custer and Crazy Horse and get both sides of what happened. We're intending to do a show about Jack the Ripper, and on that show we're going to disclose his real name because nobody actually knows who Jack the Ripper was. We welcome suggestions for future shows, or please submit them to our email, which is channelinghistory1parax@gmail.com. That was channelinghistory1parax@gmail.com.
Okay, this may not sound overly humble, but we think that we have one of the most unique shows on the radio. For one thing, with a few exceptions, all of our guests have passed, and you will not hear of them appearing on other shows. When we channel one of our spirit guests, we never have any idea of how the questions will be answered. We're not perfect. Sometimes we get answers that are not correct. Quite often we have a problem with the accuracy of dates. In early times, individuals didn't have calendars and would not have been aware of years referenced in modern calendars. Sometimes another spirit will slip in and Barry will not pick up on the energy change. When he's channeling, he rarely remembers the content of the messages he receives. There's also a possibility that he is not correctly speaking the words. What we do is not an exact science, but we do our best and we are honest.
We think that about 90% of what we do is accurate. We have had a few miscues on one of our earlier shows, but, we make mistakes, and that's the way it is. So tonight, I see that we're getting a lot of people in the chat room, and we will welcome your questions for Buddha. Last week, we had a wonderful show. We interviewed the Prophet Moses, a prominent figure for Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. Now tonight we're going to be speaking with the famous Indian leader Buddha. His teachings have endured through the ages, and Buddhism is practiced by millions today. We have interviewed him before. We had him up on YouTube for about a year and a half, and I can assure you that his energy is some of the strongest that I've ever tried to channel. Our previous shows are available on my YouTube channel under my name, Barry Strohm, Strohm, and we also post them on Podomatic for download or just to listen, and it's all free. When we begin channeling tonight, Connie's going to ask the questions, and I will answer the questions in the words of the spirits. We have a great show tonight. We've talked to Buddha before the show. He is happy that he's back on, and I assure you that this is going to be well worth listening to. So we're going to begin, but before we do, as you know by now, we always start with our prayer of protection. Connie will say that, and then we will begin to channel with our guest Buddha.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen. So, Buddha, would you like to begin with a message for our listeners?
Absolutely. I am honored to be back. I have obviously never had the opportunity to speak on a live radio show before, because when I lived, no one ever conceived that anything like you folks are enjoying tonight would ever have been possible. I want you to know that when I lived, there was much evil in the world, there was much poverty, and there were many that lived in such poor conditions that you cannot possibly conceive of them in your modern times. There were no doctors with medicines. When individuals got sick in my day, they usually died because all we had were some natural herbs. And we did have some people that had healing abilities, but they were very limited. In my time, we never heard of Christ. I lived approximately 500 years before he was born. So the times were very, very different. India at the time had a caste system where you were either very rich or you were very poor. There were very few that were in the middle. I tried to achieve personal, mental stabilities and practice meditation so that I could elevate myself above what was taking place around me. I hope that I will be able to answer your questions satisfactorily tonight. So with that, I'm ready to begin taking your first questions.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Were you born in what is now the modern Nepal?
Yes, I was born in a magnificent, beautiful country. It was a wonderful place to live. It was a difficult place to live because we had a very short growing period, but my family had no problems providing food and nourishment for us.
When were you born?
I was born approximately 500 years BC. I did live to a fairly long age, but I was in a very early time, and as I said before, it was a time that we had never heard of an individual called Christ.
Could you describe what it was like for you in your early life?
I was very, very lucky. I was born into a family of royalty. We had basically the best of everything that could be provided to us. My family tried to protect me from the world of poverty that was surrounding our palace. We very rarely ventured out. We were told that it was very dangerous. We were told that there was sickness, and we were told that we were resented by the families that lived around our property. So I lived a very, very good early life.
Did you have a wife and children?
Yes. As was the custom, I married at a fairly early age, and I did have one child.
Okay, so then you went out on a mission. Why would you leave such a life of luxury to do that?
When I went out, when I was allowed to leave and to visit among the people, I realized all of the suffering that was taking place at the time. I was very bothered by it. It was not my personality to allow others to suffer while I was living in such luxury. It bothered me greatly. My parents were very upset by the fact that I wanted to go and to study how I could obtain a personal well-being, or, as you would refer to it today, a higher energy level for my soul.
Okay. Would you like to explain reincarnation for our audience?
Yes, I can do that. Reincarnation is when the soul returns for additional lifetimes. Your human souls, or our human souls, have existed since the beginning of time. If you have lived and have an incarnate life, you have lived many, many previous lifetimes. The purpose of a previous lifetime is to learn. There are many, many lessons that a soul has to learn. It has to learn grief. It has to learn loneliness. It has to learn what it is like to suffer. It has to learn what it is like to lose loved ones very close to you. And all of these lessons are recorded in your book of life. And once a lesson is learned, it does not have to be repeated. There are many emotions and feelings and much knowledge that exists in worlds other than your planet. I did not realize this when I walked the earth, but a soul has to live lifetimes on other planets so that it can learn those lessons as well as those that can be learned here on earth. Reincarnation is the key to learning, And learning is the key to advancing in the realms of heaven. The goal of a soul is to rise in the realms of heaven, because as you rise in those realms, the sensation or ambiance of your life changes drastically. Life in the higher realms is much different than life in the lower realms. A higher realm is a status that must be earned through multiple lifetimes, and by that I mean thousands of lifetimes, because there are millions of lessons to be learned. So reincarnation is really the key to advancement of the soul and should be understood by every individual.
So when you walked the earth as Buddha, did you teach about reincarnation? Were you aware of it at that time?
We were aware of it. The early Hindu religions spoke of reincarnation and of a soul returning. Their concept was not correct in total, but their basis of the concept was. We did speak of it, and we did speak to the masses of it, and it was a lesson that we learned from our teachers.
Are you a member of the soul family of God? And if yes, could you explain how his soul family functions?
God is a universal energy that is the source of all religion and faith. God is not Christian. He is not Jew. He is all faiths. He is the basis of all teachings of love, and he is the basis upon whose teachings man must depend upon if they were to advance. There have been many souls that have lived thousands of lifetimes in service of him, not only on Earth, but on many other planets. These souls have earned a place in the seventh realm, and they continue to serve him when requested. My soul is one of those seventh level souls that serve God when requested. He requested that I returned as the human that became known as Buddha and attempt to bring less suffering and knowledge to the people of India at that time.
Did you ever serve God before your life as Buddha?
Yes, I served him many lifetimes before. On Earth, I actually came back as a very early human, one that you would refer to as a Neanderthal. I tried to help instruct the people of the time in basic tools, in basic hygiene, and in a basic religion that simply informed the primitive man that there was a higher self.
Have you served God in any lives since that of Buddha?
Yes, I have returned several times. I did not return into a lifetime that had any great impact. when I attempted to return, I became involved in situations that resulted in very short life durations.
Why was there no contemporary written record of your life as Buddha?
When I lived my life, I was highly regarded as a teacher. I was followed by many, and I was successful in bringing some relief to many individuals that were living in poverty at that time. I was often treated with respect, but there were many that regarded me as being aloof, and perhaps I would refer to it as standoffish. There were many that did not approve of what I was doing, and for that reason, many of my notes and writings were destroyed after my death. Sadly, nothing survived that was written contemporaneously with when I walked the earth.
When you walked the earth, just how difficult was life for the average person in India?
For the average person in India, it was incredibly difficult. In our area of Nepal, we had short growing seasons, and we relied very heavily on animals for food. There were many that could never afford to buy their own food and had to rely on working often from dawn to dark, 7 days a week, for wealthier individuals who in turn would provide food and nourishment. In general, poverty, it was something that would be impossible to be imagined by modern individuals, such as the average person of your country who lives at a level that far exceeds the poverty levels of those in the rest of the world.
Could you describe the state of spirituality or religion in India at the time when you were born?
When I was born, there were monasteries where monks would seclude themselves and they would practice a deep meditation which they felt lifted their souls to what they would refer to as a type of nirvana. It was a basic type of religious faith that was more self-serving and did very little for the common person. The monks would often live in seclusion and have very, very little contact with the persons around them.
Okay, so why did the Lord select the 5th century to send you back?
He felt that it was a time that it was critical to attempt to help the common person and to help put them in a position that they would better be able to help themselves survive and to find that there was a higher self for each soul, that through meditation it would be possible to find self-enlightenment that would lead to a better life track for those individuals.
Could you describe your first interaction with meditation?
I began to become in contact with the monks, and they attempted to teach me how to achieve this sense of enlightenment. There was a famous teacher named Su that I studied under, and he helped to provide me with training and how to achieve a sense of deep meditation.
So what did your family think of your newfound path?
They strongly disagreed with it. They felt that I should return home and assume royal leadership duties that were practiced by my family. They did not like to see me live in seclusion, and they wanted me to return to my family.
Okay, you mentioned that your main instructor was Su. Did you get along well with him?
In the beginning, as I learned more and more, he started to show resentment towards me, but I learned from him, and I learned from the other monks.
Okay. Could you describe the first time you reached enlightenment?
It was after a deep meditation that lasted for several days of fasting. I felt that my soul was freed of earthly bounds, and that I was in this state where all was well. There was nothing that would draw me down, but that I felt that my soul had essentially been released from my body, much like happens in death when the soul is released from the bounds of the human body.
Did that inspire you to become a monk?
In the beginning, I felt that the only way to obtain this type of enlightenment was through fasting and a monastic lifestyle. So I did become a monk, and I did follow that lifestyle. But as time went on, I started to realize that this lifestyle was not necessary in order to achieve the goals that I hoped to achieve in the rest of my life. Okay, excuse me, Mr. Buddha. We're going to take a little break right now. We are going to return in about 3 minutes, and we will continue with our conversation with Buddha.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages. You've no doubt heard of Tango and Cash, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Perhaps it takes two to tango. Well, now, on the first and third Thursdays of each month, there's a show called Tango and Friends at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Para X Radio Network with your host, Bruce Tango. And yes, there will be at least two to tango on each episode, sometimes even more. There's going to be lots of topics and lots of guests you'll all know and lots of surprises. Tango and Friends every first and third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. right here on the Para X Radio Network.
I am Oz, the great and powerful. Who are you?
If you please, I'm Dorothy, the small and meek. I've come to ask you...
Silence! The great and powerful Oz knows why you have come. Step forward, whippersnappers. Bring me the broomstick of a witch.
Martha's broom? But if we do that, we'll have to kill her to get it.
Bring me her broomstick, and I'll grant your request. Now go.
But what if she kills us first?
I said go!
What's that? What's that?
It's Marla's castle guard. And look, there's her broom right in front of the gate. Go get it.
All right, I'll go in there, witch or no witch, guards or no guards. I'll tear them apart.
Oh, no, you won't. Don't think of leaving. My little party's just beginning. I always stir my cauldron Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Para X Radio Network. Now back off from that broom or I'll turn you into Toto's chew toy.
I do believe in witches. I do.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?"
Para X Radio.
Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed the break as much as I did. So, we would like to get back to our session with Buddha.
Buddha, do you feel that monastic life that you led for a while was required to reach enlightenment?
I consider the period of my monastic life as a time when I learned. The more that I lived the monastic life, the more I realized that it would not be necessary in order to achieve many of the goals that I wanted to achieve. I actually began to realize that there was much in the monastic lifestyle that actually prevented me from learning much of what I wanted to learn. For instance, the monks were isolated from the people. I wanted to try to help the people. So there was a time that I left that lifestyle and moved out among the people and attempted to continue with the path that I wanted to lead.
Did you have psychic abilities?
I had some psychic abilities. When I would go into meditation, I would receive messages. At the time, I did not understand the source of those messages. Now that I am on the other side, I realize that that was my guides and some other of the members of the soul family of God that were telling me what changes I needed to do in order to carry out the life plan for which I was sent back. I did have a slight ability to heal. I was told that by the guides, and there were times that I did minor healings. But that was a very, very small part of what I was meant to do. I was meant to help guide the poor, to try to give them advice, and to show them that they too could achieve at least a mental state equivalent to any of the scholars of the time.
Did the concept of a universal God ever enter your mind back then?
I was told in my meditations that there was a unique spirit, a heavenly spirit, although that was not the terminology used, an ultimate spirit that determined the pathway of human growth and sent individuals back to guide and help others. I never totally understood what they were talking about until I returned to this side. My teachings did not refer to a heavenly spirit, but to an internal wellness and soul growth that would help each individual to find stability.
What is it like to be enlightened?
When you are enlightened, you understand the world around you. When you look at the beauty of nature, you understand that it is an instrument for human well-being. You understand that things happen for a reason, and you understand that the soul has many levels of enlightenment, or as you would refer to them sometimes today, different vibrations or energies.
Do you still believe that meditation is the only path to enlightenment?
No. Meditation is but one way to obtain enlightenment. You can study, you can learn the techniques of individuals, but most importantly, you can follow the teachings of love for one another and sharing. As you do these things through actions, you can increase the vibration of your soul, and you can find a personal shall we say, high that your soul enjoys that comes from helping others.
Yeah. What is ultimately real?
What is ultimately real is the ascension of the soul in the realms of heaven and of the soul achieving a level of understanding similar to the level of understanding that God would have. That is only achieved by learning and by practicing the good that must offset the evil.
Did arriving on the other side change your opinion of your teachings?
Oh, incredibly so. Although I taught of a personal fulfillment, I learned that there was, in fact, a universal energy that facilitated the learning and the evolution of the soul. Keep in mind that the soul is not only human, but can assume the forms of other cultures and of individuals that are living on places not of earth.
Did you ever think that your teachings would be enduring to over 2,000 years later?
Absolutely not. It never occurred to me. First of all, we didn't think in terms of a long-term future. In those days, we tried to live in the present and to make the most of our lives and to do the best we could for ourselves and those around us. It never occurred to us that it would be possible for humans to evolve and reach the levels that you have achieved today. But know this, there are other cultures that have achieved much, much more than you humans have at this time of your evolution. There are very, very advanced cultures from which you can learn much. So even though you have evolved far beyond whatever we conceived of, there is still much more to be learned. I am glad that the teachings that were instilled in me still play an active role in guiding individuals today through these troubled times to lives of peace and tranquility.
Buddha, would you describe heaven for us?
Heaven is all around you. I am in heaven, even though I'm currently standing behind you as we do this radio show. Heaven is basically indescribable. It has no limits. It has incredible beauty. It has whatever you really want it to have. As I spoke earlier, there are 7 realms. The upper realms are much more magnificent than those in the lower. It is this magnificence that makes the soul go through the agony of reincarnation to learn lessons so that you can move to a higher level and obtain more of the incredible beauty and magnificence of the upper realms.
Okay. Would you describe nirvana for us, please?
In our day, we conceived of nirvana as the highest state of soul enlightenment. Nirvana could be compared to the seventh realm of heaven, because that is the highest level that a soul can obtain on the other side. So the closest comparison that I could make would be to the seventh realm of heaven.
Okay. What did you teach of animal sacrifice back in those days?
In the days that I walked the earth as Buddha, it was very common to sacrifice animals in an attempt to gain favorability of idols or gods. I never felt that sacrifice was necessary or even morally right. I felt that animals had souls as well as humans, and that it was possible that a human could reincarnate as an animal, and that you would be sacrificing a soul that would have been human. I know now that human souls do not return as animals, but in those days there was contemporary belief that a human could return in the form of an animal.
Okay, as we mentioned before, that there's no written record concurrent with your lifetime. Are the writings referring to your lifetime accurate?
Some are, and as in the case of the Gospels, some aren't. Some of my teachings and accomplishments were exaggerated, and I would say some were also underestimated. So there are many things that are true, and thankfully people study and follow many of the teachings that were accurate to my words.
Yeah. At what age did you die?
I lived to be the equivalent of what you would call around 80 years of age. As I grew older, I found that my mind was not nearly as sharp, and I had very few accomplishments in my later years. I had much pain, and I suffered from many of the illnesses of old age. I will tell you that when I passed, I was very happy to leave the body in which my soul was residing.
Yes. Were you poisoned?
There are those that think I was poisoned, but no. I passed of what you would now know as a stomach cancer. It was very painful, and it took many years for me to actually pass. The suffering was indeed part of my life plan, but I truly wish that it was a lesson that I had learned in previous lifetimes, because I suffered great pain towards the end.
Okay. Are there any of your teachings that you would change?
If I was to teach today, I would include the concept of a universal deity. I would include the concept that the deity is non-denominational and is the salvation for all individuals, regardless of race, color, religion, or country of origin. That was not a concept that we ever conceived of when I walked the earth as Buddha. Many of my teachings can dovetail with that type of a concept of universal deity.
Okay, we have a question from our chat room for you, Buddha. It said, when we go to heaven, will we be able to embrace our loved ones, and will we see them at the age that they died?
When you pass, you will be met. In most cases, it is by your family, is by your loved ones and friends that have come before you. In certain instances, you will be met by heavenly figures. For instance, when you and Connie pass, we will be there to greet you and to comment on your life as you attempted to live it. It is a fact that those individuals will not appear as they did in death. They will appear at a much younger age, at an age when they were living a vital lifetime. If the individual died as an infant, it will assume an adult presence, and it can be possible that you will not recognize them. But you will be greeted. Your guides will be there to help you, because it does take a time to get used to what is going on around you on the other side of the veil. In time, you will understand all that has taken place in your life. You will understand what you've done wrong, and you will understand what you've done right. But yes, your loved ones will be definitely there to greet you.
I think that was a pretty good answer. Okay, what would you tell us about the many paths to heaven?
Many religions have taken the tact that the only path to heaven is through the doors of their churches or institutions. That is simply not true. There are many of you that walk the earth that perhaps have never even learned or heard of Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or any of the organized religions. Those individuals are judged on how they live their lives. If they live a good life, they will advance in the realms. And if they lived an evil life, they will move to the lower realms. So, what it comes down to is how you practice your lives. Whether you show love towards others, whether you help others, and whether you live a life of goodness. You do not have to follow an organized religion as long as you follow the basic teachings that will help guide humanity and help its evolution.
Okay, what is your role now that you're on the other side?
I try to guide and help others. For instance, I'm appearing on your radio show tonight, and I'm giving messages that, if individuals follow, will help their advancement of the soul, and if they practice the love of which I speak, they will find that love is contagious and other people will be infected by the love and help others, and in reality, that is the only way that humans can truly advance.
Would you have a message for the listeners that think our interviews are not for real?
I can assure you that what Barry and Connie do is absolutely real. Barry had no idea what my answers were going to be tonight. I helped write the questions, but I never told him of what the answers would be. There were subject areas that I wanted to cover, and we covered those. But there is no way that what is taking place before you is not a miracle of spirit communication and an act of the universal deity.
Okay, we just have one final thing, and that is, do you have a final message? We are so happy to have had you here tonight.
Yes, I have a final message. Many of my teachings speak of basically getting along with one another. If you teach others of love, love will come to you. It is only love that can help the humans to advance. If you do not teach that love, human evolution will truly be in danger. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I hope that my words will help you. I hope that your lives will be improved by the messages that I brought to you. Know that there is a universal love, that love comes from a universal deity, and that love can make you live truly fulfilled lives. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you for having me, and if you ask, I will return.
Thank you so much, Buddha. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful messages. Next week, we're going to be channeling with Princess Diana. She's going to answer questions about her life, death, and her opinions about the marriages of her son. Submit questions in advance to our email. That's channelinghistoryonparax@gmail.com. That's channelinghistoryonparax@gmail.com. I would thank you for listening once again to us. Please join us next Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the ParaX Radio Network. And with that, I would like to say good night, and God bless all of you.
The sound of the risk of repeating what he has said. God bless you all.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after. Don't go away. Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.